Sister Amina is a woman of striking, serene beauty and unwavering spiritual resolve. Born in a vibrant village in East Africa, her early life was marked by sudden tragedy when she was orphaned at a young age during a period of civil unrest. Taken in by a missionary orphanage run by an international Catholic order, Amina found not just shelter, but a profound sense of divine purpose. Growing up within the convent walls, she poured her heart into her studies, acts of charity, and deep contemplative prayer. Her gentle intelligence and natural leadership saw her rise through the ranks of the religious community. By her early 30s, she had taken her final perpetual vows and was consecrated as the Reverend Sister of her parish, a beacon of hope, compassion, and unshakable faith in a bustling, often chaotic city. She had never known the touch of romantic love, nor had she ever desired it, having betrothed her soul entirely to God. It was a quiet, rainy Tuesday evening. The grand wooden doors of the inner chapel remained unlocked for the late evening prayer vigil. Sister Amina knelt softly at the altar, surrounded by a small, devout group of parishioners murmuring the closing mysteries of the rosary. The candlelight flickered against the stained glass windows, casting long, peaceful shadows across the stone floor. Then the heavy oak doors creaked open. Footsteps echoed heavy, deliberate, and entirely out of place in the sacred stillness. The parishioners paused, turning their heads in quiet apprehension. Standing near the entrance was a man who commanded the room without uttering a single word. Kang Jin-woo is a powerful and feared figure in the underworld, the supreme boss of a prominent, Korean-led transnational syndicate operating out of the city's neon-lit ports and sprawling financial districts. Impeccably tailored in bespoke charcoal suits, Jin-woo possessed sharp, piercing eyes, raven black hair, and a cold, predatory composure that masked a brilliant, ruthless tactical mind. He ruled his empire with absolute authority, indifferent to human suffering, and untouched by vulnerability. He was a man who took whatever he desired by any means necessary, believing the world belonged strictly to the fierce. Jin-woo had ducked into the church merely to evade a rival faction's surveillance detail, seeking a quiet, unexpected place to lay low for 20 minutes. As Jin-woo stepped out of the shadows, his cold eyes swept the chapel. They landed instantly on the altar. There stood Sister Amina, draped in her pristine white and black habit. Her head bowed in quiet reverence, her profile caught in the warm, golden glow of the altar candles. To Jin-woo, it was as if time simply stopped. In a world defined by blood, betrayal, and neon-lit decay, she looked like an impossible vision of pure light untouched, ethereal, and utterly mesmerizing. For the first time in his hardened life, Jin-woo felt a jolt strike straight through his chest. It wasn't fear, and it wasn't strategic calculation. It was an instant, consuming obsession. As Sister Amina turned her head, her calm, luminous eyes met his dark, intense gaze across the silent pews. A sudden chill swept through the chapel. She offered a gentle, polite nod of Christian welcome, unaware of the storm she had just unleashed. Jin-woo stood frozen, his pulse hammering against his ribs. He didn't blink. He didn't look away. Inside his mind, a cold, absolute vow was forged. She belongs to God right now, but she is going to be mine, no matter what it takes. The heavy oak doors of the chapel had barely clicked shut behind Kang Jin-woo that rainy Tuesday night. Yet the phantom weight of his gaze lingered long after he vanished into the dark. Sister Amina remained kneeling at the altar for hours after her parishioners had trickled out into the night. Her customary peace felt fractured. She had spent a decade insulating her heart within the sanctuary of holy vows, blind to the dark, violent currents that churned just beyond the church walls. But that man, with his tailored charcoal suit, raven black hair, and chillingly intense eyes, had left a footprint on her consciousness. By morning, the encounter should have faded into a strange, unsettling memory. Instead, a quiet, nagging unease settled over her. As a Reverend Sister, Amina's world was largely confined to the convent, the parish register, and the local community markets. She had no television in her quarters, and internet access was strictly limited to church administration. Yet, secrets in a major metropolitan port city rarely stay buried. The realization struck 3 days later during a routine visit from Father Thomas, the elderly parish priest who frequently brought in local newspapers and community bulletins. As they sorted through food pantry donations in the rectory, Father Thomas dropped a heavily creased metropolitan newspaper onto the wooden table, shaking his head. "Terrible business down at the East Docks last night," the old priest sighed, pointing to a front-page spread detailing a brutal turf war and a multi-million-dollar smuggling ring dismantled by federal authorities. "Men like this, Kang Jin-woo, they tear this city apart from the shadows." Amina froze. The name hit her ears like a physical blow. She reached out, her fingers gently pulling the newspaper closer. There, staring up from the glossy print, was the face from the chapel. The sharp jawline, the piercing gaze, the unmistakable aura of absolute control. The article outlined his background in chilling detail. Kang Jin-woo, a ruthless, high-ranking Korean syndicate leader who controlled shipping ports, financial laundering networks, and illegal trafficking across 3 continents. The police described him as a ghost, untouchable, brilliant, and utterly devoid of mercy. Why did a cloistered nun, devoted entirely to God, feel an uncharacteristic surge of curiosity compelling her to read every word of a criminal profile? It made no logical sense. She had nothing to do with him, and he had nothing to do with the church. Yet, as she stared at his photograph, a strange, protective defiance stirred inside her. She felt an inexplicable urge to understand the darkness that had walked uninvited into her sanctuary, not out of attraction, but out of a deep, unsettling premonition that their paths were far from finished crossing. Fate, it seemed, decided to test that premonition sooner than she expected. 2 days after reading the article, Amina stepped out of the convent gates to run an urgent errand at the Central District Pharmacy for the parish medical chest. Carrying a canvas tote bag and shielding herself with a dark umbrella against the persistent drizzle, she took a shortcut through a quiet, cobblestone alleyway behind the commercial district. She turned the corner and walked straight into a solid, expensive wall of fabric. Amina stumbled back, dropping her bag. Loose bandages and small medicine bottles spilled across the wet stone. "My apologies, sister," a deep, smooth baritone replied. A gloved hand reached down swiftly, scooping up the fallen bottles with effortless grace. When the man stood up and offered them back to her, Amina's breath caught in her throat. It was him. Kang Jin-woo stood before her, wearing a sleek black trench coat, completely unescorted by his usual swarm of bodyguards. Close up, the raw magnetic intensity of his presence was overwhelming. Amina didn't take the bottles immediately. Instead, she straightened her posture, looking directly into his dark, calculating eyes with a cool, composed gaze. "Mr. Kang, I presume," Amina said softly, her voice steady despite the sudden racing of her heart. Jin-woo's expression shifted from casual politeness to genuine surprise. A slow, knowing smirk touched the corner of his lips. He tilted his head, studying her with undisguised fascination. "You know who I am," Jin-woo stated, it not being a question. "Your face was in the public ledger this week," Amina replied evenly, finally accepting the bottles from his hand and placing them back into her bag. "A man of your violent reputation rarely frequents houses of God unless he is seeking sanctuary from something he cannot outrun, or perhaps looking for something he shouldn't have." Jin-woo stepped closer, closing the distance between them just enough to make the air feel thin. The scent of cedar and rain enveloped her. "I wasn't looking for sanctuary," Reverend Sister Jin-woo murmured, his voice dropping to a low, intimate register that sent a shiver straight down her spine. "And now that I've found what I was looking for, I intend to keep it." Amina's eyes flashed with righteous fire. "I belong to God, Mr. Kang. You are playing a very dangerous game with forces you cannot control." "Let's see whose faith is stronger then," Jin-woo replied smoothly, tipping his head in a mock salute before walking past her into the rain, leaving Amina standing alone in the alley, her heart pounding with a dangerous, uncharted rhythm. Nearly 3 weeks had passed since their unexpected collision in the cobblestone alleyway. During that time, Sister Amina had tried to bury the memory of Kang Jin-woo beneath a mountain of parish duties, early morning prayers, and administrative paperwork. She had learned his name, read the stark police profiles detailing his syndicate empire, and recognized the inherent danger of his world. Yet, despite her best efforts to dismiss him as a passing storm, his chillingly intense gaze and the memory of his cedar-scented presence lingered at the edge of her thoughts. Amina assumed men like Jin-woo lived in a stratosphere entirely separate from her humble mission. She was wrong. The rain outside the convent walls beat down in heavy, relentless sheets. Inside the parish charity clinic, the atmosphere was thick with the familiar sense of antiseptic, old paper, and damp wool. True to his silent vow in the chapel and his quiet obsession since their alley encounter, Jin-woo had spent weeks acquiring every detail of Amina's life, her schedule, her responsibilities, and the struggling community clinic she ran every Thursday morning. Amina stood behind the distribution counter, calmly handing out medical supplies and canned goods to the elderly and the destitute. Suddenly, a heavy hush fell over the waiting room. The double doors swung open and a chilling wave of silence washed over the crowd. Half a dozen towering men in sleek, identical black overcoats filed in, fanning out with practiced military precision to block every exit. The shivering refugees scrambled out of the way, gripping their parcels in sheer terror. And then came Jin-woo. He walked through the parting crowd as if the world belonged solely to him. Rejecting any disguise, he wore a custom midnight blue suit that contrasted sharply with the humble, peeling paint of the charity hall. He stopped dead in front of Amina's counter, his dark, unblinking eyes locking onto hers with a familiar, predatory intensity. Sister Amina's breath hitched, but years of serving a community in crisis kept her hands steady. She squared her shoulders, drawing herself up to her full height behind the wooden barrier. The brief, polite recognition they had shared at the pharmacy weeks ago was gone. This was an outright invasion. "This is a sanctuary for the poor and the sick, Mr. Kang," Amina said, her voice dropping into a low, firm register that echoed clearly in the hushed room. "Your kind of violence has no place here. State your business and leave."
Leave.
A slow, dangerous smile curved the corner of Jin-woo's lips. It was the first time she had heard him speak at length since their brief exchange in the alley, deep, gravelly baritone that sent an involuntary shiver down her spine.
Violence?
"I haven't raised a hand." Reverend Sister Jin-woo replied, stepping past the boundary line, ignoring the gasps of the surrounding nuns. He reached slowly into his coat pocket. Amina instantly tensed, her hand brushing the small crucifix resting against her chest. Instead of a weapon, Jin-woo pulled out a heavy, velvet-bound ledger and slammed it onto the counter. He opened it to reveal crisp, handwritten records of massive, anonymous financial endowments. "I'm here to make a donation," Jin-woo murmured, leaning in close enough that Amina could catch the faint, intoxicating scent of cedarwood, an expensive cologne entirely foreign to the clinic. $5 million. Wired directly to your parish account today. Enough to keep this shelter running for the next 10 years. No strings attached, except for one. Amina stared at the ledger, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The church does not take blood money. Take your wealth and walk out those doors. Jin-woo didn't blink. He reached across the counter, his gloved fingers brushing the edge of her white wimple with agonizing slowness. Amina froze, trapped in the dark gravity of his gaze. "You think you can hide behind those walls and pretend men like me don't exist?" Jin-woo whispered, his voice dark, velvet, and absolute. "You prayed for the lost souls of this city, sister. God must have sent me straight to your altar, because I am never letting you go." Before Amina could pull away or strike his hand, Jin-woo turned sharply on his heel, signaling his men to withdraw. As he walked out into the rain, he left behind the heavy ledger and a terrified, spellbound woman whose sacred world had just been irrevocably broken open. Days after the dramatic confrontation at the parish charity clinic, the heavy wooden doors of the convent felt less like a shield and more like a fragile barrier. The $5 million ledger Kang Jin-woo had left behind was locked securely away in the parish safe, untouched and rejected, yet its very existence hung over the convent like a silent storm cloud. Sister Amina spent her days caught in a relentless cycle of prayer and administrative duties, trying desperately to quiet her racing thoughts. But secrets, in a tight-knit religious community, rarely stay hidden for long. On a quiet Saturday afternoon, a formal summons arrived from Mother Superior Beatrice, the wise, sharp-eyed elder who governed the local order. Amina's heart ticked upward as she walked down the polished stone corridors toward the Mother Superior's private study, her hands instinctively smoothing the folds of her habit. Mother Superior Beatrice sat behind a mahogany desk, illuminated by the pale light filtering through a stained glass window. She didn't look up immediately as Amina entered. Instead, she closed a ledger, steepled her fingers, and raised her gaze. "Sit down, child," Beatrice instructed, her voice calm, measured, and rich with decades of spiritual wisdom. Amina complied, folding her hands tightly in her lap. "You wanted to see me, Mother?" Beatrice studied her for a long, quiet moment, as if reading the hidden anxieties written across the younger nun's face. "I am an old woman, Amina, and I have lived long enough to know the human heart quite well," Beatrice began softly. "For weeks now, the sisters have whispered about the man in the tailored suits who lingers in the pews. The man who made that staggering illicit offer at our clinic. Today I watched him from the gallery. I saw the way he looks at you." Amina swallowed hard, feeling a sudden warmth rise to her cheeks. "Mother, I assure you—" "Hush, child, let me finish," Beatrice interrupted gently, though her eyes held a piercing clarity. "I know you are devoted to your vows. I know your heart belongs to God, but I am grown, and I know what I see when I look at a man possessed, that powerful syndicate leader. He does not visit this church because he seeks salvation or wishes to support our charity. From everything I have observed, he comes here solely for you. What do you make of this?" Amina sat frozen, her breath hitched in her throat. To hear her deepest, most terrifying fear spoken aloud by the woman she respected most in the world left her entirely speechless. She looked down at her hands, her mind a chaotic blur of denial, confusion, and a strange, illicit tremor of fear that she dared not name. I don't know what to say, Mother," Amina finally murmured, her voice barely a whisper. "He is a dangerous man. I have tried to turn him away. I have nothing to do with his world." Mother Superior Beatrice sighed softly, leaning back in her chair. "Beware, Amina. When a man like that sets his sights on something, he does not simply walk away. Protect your soul, child, and guard your heart." That evening, the heavy rains returned, washing over the city streets in a furious torrent. Desperate for solace and a quiet space to center her spiraling thoughts, Amina slipped into the empty main chapel after evening vespers. The vast room was dark, illuminated only by the amber glow of the sanctuary lamp hanging above the tabernacle. She knelt at the altar, pressing her palms together, closing her eyes as she began to whisper a frantic prayer for strength and guidance. "Lord, protect me from the storm I cannot control. Give me the strength to remain steadfast. You pray for strength every time I am near, Reverend Sister." Amina gasped, her eyes snapping open. She scrambled to her feet and turned around. Standing in the aisle just beneath the shadowed arches of the transept was Kang Jin-woo. He had no bodyguards with him tonight. He wore an unbuttoned black wool coat, his raven hair slightly damp from the rain, and his dark eyes burned with an intense, unyielding fire as they locked onto hers. Amina's heart hammered violently against her ribs. She took a sharp step backward toward the altar steps, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and righteous indignation. "How did you get in here? The doors were locked," Amina demanded, her voice echoing sharply through the cavernous nave. "You have no reverence for this place, Mr. Kang. Leave this sanctuary immediately, or I will call for the parish guards." Jin-woo didn't flinch. Instead, he took slow, deliberate steps down the aisle, closing the distance between them until he was standing just feet away from the altar rail. The clean, sharp scent of rain and cedarwood filled the air around her. He stopped, tilting his head slightly as a dark, intense look crossed his face. "Isn't the church a place for sinners, Sister Amina?" Jin-woo asked softly, his deep baritone cutting straight through the silence of the chapel. A faint, challenging smirk touched his lips, though his eyes remained deadly serious. "If I am the greatest sinner in this city, why do you constantly send me away from the very place I am supposed to seek redemption?" Amina stared at him, paralyzed by the raw, magnetic gravity of his presence. "You aren't here for redemption," Amina whispered back, her voice shaking slightly as she fought to maintain her composure. "You are here to mock my faith." Jin-woo stepped right up to the altar rail, resting one gloved hand upon the polished wood, leaning in close enough that Amina could feel the heat radiating from him. "I am entirely serious," Jin-woo murmured, his voice dropping to a low, velvet intensity that made her breath catch. "You can hide behind your prayers, and your Mother Superior can warn you about men like me all she wants. But you know as well as I do, sister, God brought you into my path for a reason, and I am not leaving until you admit it." The silence that followed Jin-woo's words was heavy enough to suffocate. The flickering amber glow of the sanctuary lamp cast long, distorted shadows across the altar, framing the two figures like combatants in a silent war. Amina gripped the wooden edge of the altar behind her, her knuckles turning white. The fragile boundaries she had fought so hard to maintain finally shattered under the weight of her mounting frustration. "You arrogant, manipulative man," Amina burst out, her voice dropping its customary calm, replaced by a sharp, ringing intensity that echoed off the stone walls. "You think you can waltz into a house of God, treat sacred vows like a game, and twist scripture to justify your stalking? This isn't a theater for your amusement, Mr. Kang. I am a bride of Christ, not a prize to be won in one of your underworld power struggles." Jin-woo didn't flinch. If anything, the flash of genuine anger in her eyes only fueled the dark, unyielding fire within him. He straightened up from the rail, his expression hardening into something cold and razor-sharp. "You think this is a game?" Jin-woo stepped directly over the low wooden gate, invading the sacred space of the chancel. His voice dropped to a low, dangerous rumble, vibrating with suppressed emotion. "You think I spend my nights tracking down a nun for sport? I built an empire on blood, discipline, and absolute control. Every single person in my world wants something from me: power, protection, or my demise. You are the only thing in my entire life that has ever made me stop breathing." Amina stepped forward to meet him, refusing to cower despite the towering, imposing presence he projected. "Then look away. Go back to your towers, your money, and your violence. Leave my soul in peace." "I can't," Jin-woo snapped back, his voice rising, carrying a raw, desperate edge that shocked them both. He closed the remaining distance, stopping mere inches from her. The sheer intensity of his gaze was staggering. "Do you think I wanted this? Do you think I planned to walk into a random chapel and have my entire world appended by a woman in a habit? I tried to walk away, Amina. I spent days staring at that ledger, trying to convince myself you were just another fleeting ghost. But every time I close my eyes, all I see is you standing at this altar." Given name-dropping, the formal, distant sister felt like a physical touch, burning straight through her defenses. "Stop it," she whispered, her voice trembling as she raised a hand, pressing her palm flat against his chest to push him back. Her fingers collided with the solid, unyielding wall of his coat, feeling the fierce, erratic thumping of his heart beneath. "You are poison to everything I stand for. A union between us is impossible. It is a sin. It is madness." Instead of pulling away, Jin-woo reached up. With agonizing slowness, he wrapped his warm hand over her smaller one, pressing her palm tighter against his chest, right over his beating heart. "Then let me be a sinner," Jin-woo murmured, leaning down so close that his breath brushed against her temple, smelling faintly of rain and cedar. "Because the moment I looked into your eyes, I stopped caring about heaven." Amina froze. For one terrifying, breathless second, the entire world narrowed down to the heat of his hand, the anchor of his heartbeat, and the gravitational pull of his dark eyes. A traitorous warmth bloomed in her chest, a sudden, electric shock of desire that terrified her more than any threat he had ever made. With a gasp, she yanked her hand back as if burned, stumbling backward until the back of her knees hit the stone altar steps. "Get out," Amina breathed, her eyes wide, shining with unshed tears of panic and defiance. She pointed a shaking finger toward the heavy oak doors. "Get out of this church, Kang Jin-woo, and never come back." Jin-woo stood frozen, his chest rising and falling heavily. He stared at her, seeing the genuine terror and turmoil in her eyes, not just of him, but of the undeniable bond forming between them. The fierce, possessive fire in his gaze soft in just a fraction, replaced by a grim, unyielding resolve. He didn't apologize. He didn't step closer. Instead, he took one slow step back, dipping his head in a silent, respectful acknowledgement of her fierce boundary. "I'll leave for tonight, Amina," Jin-woo said softly, his voice a low promise echoing in the empty church. "But don't mistake my patience for surrender. I am not finished with you yet." Without another word, Jin-woo turned on his heel and walked down the central aisle, the heavy doors swinging open and letting in a rush of cold wind before clicking shut behind him. Amina sank slowly onto the altar steps, her legs finally giving out beneath her. She clutched her small crucifix tightly in her trembling hands, burying her face in her arms as the reality of the storm crashing down upon her finally took hold. Days after their confrontation in the empty chapel, Sister Amina tried desperately to reassert control over her life. On a busy Friday morning, she ventured into the bustling central market district to procure fresh provisions for the parish kitchen. Surrounded by vendors shouting prices, the clatter of carts, and the vibrant hum of city life, she kept her focus entirely fixed on her tasks, meticulously checking items off her ledger. Yet she could feel it, that unmistakable gravity. Seated at an outdoor espresso table across the narrow cobblestone square, half hidden behind dark sunglasses and a slate gray coat, was Kang Jin-woo. He wasn't approaching her. He wasn't sending his men. He was simply watching her. Amina forced her chin up, her fingers tightening around her woven basket. She deliberately turned her back to him, chatting animatedly with a local fruit vendor, laughing at a joke she barely heard, and making a supreme, agonizing effort to look utterly unbothered. Every nerve ending in her body hummed with awareness of his eyes tracking her every move. When she finally hurried away down a side street, the ghost of his gaze burned straight through the back of her habit. 3 nights later, the convent fell into a deep, heavy slumber. Seeking absolute solitude from her swirling thoughts, Amina slipped into the dim, shadowy interior of the chapel, seeking a place where the walls could shelter her overwhelming grief. She entered the small, enclosed wooden structure of the confessional booth, kneeling on the narrow bench in the dark compartment. She pressed her forehead against the wooden screen, tears finally breaking free, silently weeping and praying for deliverance from the temptation that was consuming her soul. "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned," she whispered into the empty air of the booth, her voice breaking. "I am listening, Sister." Amina gasped, her eyes snapping open in the pitch-dark compartment. That deep, gravelly baritone vibrated through the wooden lattice from the adjacent priest's side of the confessional. Before she could process the shock, the heavy door of the penitent's side creaked open. Amina scrambled up, frantically trying to slide open her exit door, but a gloved hand slammed against the frame, blocking her path. Jin-woo slipped effortlessly into the tight, enclosed space, pulling the door shut behind him and plunging them both into absolute, intimate darkness. "What are you doing? Let me out of here," Amina breathed out, pressing her back against the wooden wall of the booth as the overwhelming scent of cedar and rain enveloped her entirely. "This is sacrilege. I am not a priest. Go to the clergy and confess your sins. I don't hear confessions." "I am not here to confess my sins to God, Amina," Jin-woo murmured, his voice thick, rough, and trembling with a raw vulnerability she had never heard before. He stepped closer, caging her in the narrow space. "I am here to confess you." Amina tried to turn her face away, her heart hammering wildly against her ribs. "Stop it, please." "No, you listen to me," Jin-woo interrupted, his voice dropping to a fierce, desperate whisper. Do you have any idea what you've done to me? For 30 years, my mind was a machine cold, calculated, untouched by anything human. But ever since that night in the chapel, you haunt every breath I take. I sit in my boardroom and all I hear is your voice. I look at my life of blood and violence, and for the first time, it sickens me because I know I am unworthy of you. You have ruined me, Amina. You are my only addiction, and I cannot survive another day without you. Before Amina could draw breath to fight back or utter a prayer, Jin-woo's hand gently cupped the side of her face, his thumb brushing across her trembling cheek. The heat of his touch paralyzed her, and then his lips met hers. It wasn't gentle. It was a desperate, consuming collision of fire and grace. For a terrifying, breathless second, Amina froze, and then the dam broke. All her repressed longing, her hidden fears, and the undeniable pull of her heart melted away. Her hands lifted, gripping the lapel of his coat as she kissed him back with a fierce, forbidden intensity that defied everything she had ever sworn to protect. The kiss changed everything, shattering the fragile illusion that Amina could simply return to her cloistered life as if nothing had happened. Consumed by guilt and turmoil, Amina requested an immediate private audience with Mother Superior Beatrice the next morning. In the quiet sanctuary of the office, Amina broke down, confessing the encounter in the confessional booth, the depth of her feelings, and the terrifying realization that her heart was no longer wholly within the convent walls. Mother Superior Beatrice listened quietly, her weathered face remaining serene. When Amina finished, the elder nun reached out, placing a gentle, wrinkled hand over Amina's trembling fingers. "My child," Beatrice said softly, her voice rich with profound understanding. "You came to this missionary house when you were a broken orphan, seeking refuge, safety, and a way to survive. You chose this path out of a pure desire to serve God. But true faith is not a prison cell built of stone walls and heavy locks." Amina looked up, her eyes wide with unshed tears. "Mother, are you saying I have failed my vows?" "No," Beatrice smiled gently. "I am saying that God's purpose for you may not be confined to these four walls. Your heart is out there now. Perhaps your true calling is not to hide from the brokenness of this world, but to step into the dark and be the light to save a lost soul who desperately needs redemption. If you stay here out of obligation while your soul is elsewhere, you serve neither God nor yourself. Go out into the world, pursue your path, discover your true purpose. If God means for you to return to us as a sister, these doors will always be open. But if your purpose is to walk beside that man and redeem him from his darkness, then you must have the courage to follow your fate." The words echoed in Amina's mind like a divine mandate. That very afternoon, the heavy silence of her small cell was punctuated only by the soft thud of a single canvas suitcase resting on her narrow cot. She packed light, her simple clothes, a few personal items, her prayer book, and the small silver crucifix she had worn since childhood. She changed out of her religious habit into civilian attire, a simple, dark blue woolen dress and a light scar, feeling strangely stripped of her armor, yet lighter than she had ever felt in her life. When she stepped out of the heavy convent gates for the final time, the afternoon sun beat down on the pavement. She stood on the busy sidewalk, the roar of city traffic washing over her ears, and suddenly realized a stark, terrifying truth. She had nowhere to go. She knew no one in this sprawling, dangerous metropolis outside of the church walls, and she had no home, no money, and no safety net. She was entirely alone, standing at the precipice of a completely uncharted world, with only the echo of a dangerous man's voice and an uncertain destiny waiting in the shadows. The heavy wooden doors of the convent clicked shut behind her, sealing off a decade of safety, routine, and predictable prayer. Standing on the sunlit pavement in her simple blue woolen dress and light scarf, Sister Amina, now simply Amina, felt a sudden, chilling gust of reality. The bustling city surged around her with an indifferent roar. Honking horns, hurried pedestrians, and the distant hum of traffic filled the air. She clutched the handle of her single canvas suitcase, her chest tightening. She had no apartment, no savings, no contacts outside the parish, and nowhere to sleep when night fell. Mother Superior Beatrice had given her blessing to step into the world, but stepping into the world meant stepping straight into a vacuum. For a fleeting second, doubt crept in. Did I make a terrible mistake? As if summoned by the sheer weight of her uncertainty, a low, purring mechanical hum cut through the street noise. A sleek, custom black luxury sedan glided smoothly to a halt right at the curb beside her. The tinted rear window rolled down silently, and a moment later, the door swung open. Kang Jin-woo stepped out. He wasn't wearing his usual armor of cold, untouchable detachment. Instead, for the first time since she had met him, his dark eyes held a bright, undeniable flash of triumph, an underlying fierce protectiveness. He wore an unbuttoned charcoal coat over a crisp white shirt, the afternoon light catching the sharp lines of his face. He walked around the hood of the car, stopping just a few feet away from her. A slow, genuine smile touched the corners of his lips. "I told you," Jin-woo said softly, his voice warm and rich against the city din. "I am never letting you go." Amina stepped back instinctively, her fingers tightening around her suitcase handle, though her heart gave a traitorous, frantic leap at the sight of him. "Stay back, Mr. Kang," Amina said, her voice carrying a firm, defensive edge, though it lacked the absolute armor of her old habit. How did you even know I would be standing here?" "I told you I watch over what matters to me," Jin-woo replied simply, his gaze dropping to the single canvas bag at her feet before rising back to her eyes. He gestured toward the open door of the sleek vehicle. "Get in. Let me take you home." Amina shook her head firmly, her chin lifting with a spark of her old, unyielding spirit. "No, I cannot go with you, and you cannot take me home," Amina declared, her voice steadying. "I left the convent because my heart was torn, and Mother Superior taught me that I must find my own true purpose in life. Whatever happened between us in the confessional, it happened. But I refuse to blame you entirely, and I refuse to let you dictate my next steps. God may be showing me a new path, but it is a path I have to walk and discover myself independently." Jin-woo didn't interrupt. He listened intently, his expression shifting from triumphant satisfaction to a deep, profound respect as he studied the woman standing before him, stripped of her religious vestments, yet standing taller than ever. Jin-woo let out a slow, measured breath, running a gloved hand through his dark hair. He stepped closer, keeping a respectful distance, his voice dropping to a low, earnest register. "I know you need to find yourself, Amina. I know you need space. And I know you want nothing to do with my world," Jin-woo said, his tone shockingly gentle for a man of his violent reputation. "But look around you. You have no one in this city. You have nowhere to sleep. The streets out here are cruel, cold, and dangerous. I cannot stand by and watch you get hurt, or let you wander into the dark unprotected." Amina opened her mouth to argue, but Jin-woo raised a hand gently, cutting her off. "Listen to me," he urged. "If you don't want to stay in my house, you don't have to. I own a private, secure apartment on the quiet side of the district, fully furnished, completely isolated from my business affairs. You can live there in total peace. I give you my word as a man. I will not force myself upon you. I will not demand anything from you, and you won't even see me unless you want to. But at least there, behind locked doors, you will be safe." He took one step closer, his dark eyes locking onto hers with absolute sincerity. "Take the distance you need, find your purpose, but let me protect your body while your soul figures out where it belongs. I will be waiting until the day you are ready to consider me." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the hum of the passing traffic. Amina looked into his eyes, searching for the ruthless syndicate boss she had read about in the newspapers, but finding only a fierce, aching devotion directed entirely at her. She was completely alone, utterly unequipped for the harsh realities of the outside world, and she knew he was offering her the only lifeline available. Slowly, Amina exhaled a shaky breath. She looked down at her single bag, then back up at him. "If I accept this apartment, Mr. Kang," Amina said quietly, her voice trembling slightly with the magnitude of her decision, "it is on my terms. Absolute distance. Total silence." A faint, relieved smile touched Jin-woo's lips. He dipped his head in a deep, respectful bow. "On your terms, Amina," Jin-woo murmured. He reached down, picking up her canvas suitcase with effortless ease, and held the car door open for her, stepping aside to let her take her first, terrifying, beautiful step into an uncertain future. The ride to the secure apartment was entirely silent. True to his word, Kang Jin-woo did not press her for conversation. Nor did he look at her with the raw, consuming hunger that had defined their previous encounters. He dropped her off at a discreet, sunlit high-rise overlooking a quiet courtyard on the edge of the district, handed her the keys with a respectful nod, and vanished back into the shadows of his sprawling empire. For the next few weeks, Amina lived a life suspended between two worlds. The apartment was immaculate, safe, and entirely hers. She spent her days exploring the city streets, seeking out volunteer work in local secular clinics, and trying to piece together who she was outside the protective stone walls of the convent. She prayed in the quiet corners of public parks instead of stone chapels, slowly realizing that her faith had not died, it had simply evolved. Yet, try as she might to build a wall of independence, she was never truly alone. A single fresh orchid would appear on her doorstep every morning. A sleek black car would idle discreetly down the block whenever she walked home late at night. Jin-woo was keeping his distance, granting her the space she demanded, but his silent, protective presence wrapped around her life like velvet. Amina began to find her footing. She started to understand that her purpose wasn't just to hide from the world, but to touch the brokenness of it. But safety in a city ruled by syndicates is always an illusion. One evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline and cast long, amber shadows across her living room, her phone burner device Jin-woo had left on the kitchen counter for emergencies suddenly buzzed. It wasn't a call, it was a single cryptic text message from an unknown, untraceable number. "The Reverend Sister thinks she is safe in her ivory tower. Tell your Korean king his crown is about to drop. We are coming for her next." Amina's blood ran cold. The fragile peace she had fought so hard to build shattered in a single second. The violent underworld she had tried to escape had finally found her, and this time it wasn't just coming for her heart, it was coming for her life. As the trap snaps shut, the boundaries between faith and fire, sanctuary and survival, are about to be burned away entirely. Will Amina retreat back behind the safety of the convent walls? Or will she step directly onto the battlefield beside the man who vowed to protect her? When rival syndicates target Amina to break Kang Jin-woo's absolute control, how far will a ruthless mafia boss go to shield the woman who taught him how to feel? And when the ultimate choice between damnation and redemption arrives, will their forbidden love destroy them both, or save them? What do you think happens next? Drop your theories and predictions in the comments below. Did Jin-woo make a fatal mistake bringing Amina into his world, or is she the ultimate key to his redemption? Make sure to subscribe, hit that notification bell, and stay tuned for the explosive launch of Part 2 of The Velvet and the Thorn.